Look at the right track, wrong track. Look at the generic ballot where Republicans have an advantage. Look at Joe Biden's historically low approval ratings. The Democrats are set to be walloped in these elections, and the 1-6 committee is their last-ditch effort to try to get voters to consider not voting Republican.
We are pleased now to welcome a fixture in Republican politics, Matt Schlapp, chairman of CPAC and the former White House political director. Matt, great to see you. Welcome to your first appearance on Centerpoint.
Great to be with you, Doug.
Let's start off by talking about yesterday's primaries. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but what are you excited about? What do you foresee based upon yesterday's results?
Look, I think after all these primaries, the Republican Party hasn't really committed any true errors, and we're setting ourselves up to have a tremendous midterm in November. This is going to be a red wave like we haven't seen for, I don't know, a generation, because the Democratic Party has embraced socialism and wokeism. I think the wokeism is the most underreported part of the disgust Americans, both Republicans, Democrats, whatever political affiliation they have, they're just tired of the woke, and they're tired of being told that they're racist and America's a bad place.
I want to turn to a separate issue. Yesterday's SCOTUS decision on school choice, giving religious-affiliated schools, private schools, an opportunity to use federal funds. How important is that?
It's a really big deal, and the three liberals on the court said that this, tears down the wall between church and state. There really is no constitutional wall separating church and state. What we have is a setup where we don't have established churches or an established church, but religion and churches, they're all part of the American history we love so much. So what the court did is restore this idea that if you're going to say to parents they have the right to choose private schools in areas where they don't have really good options, that religious schools have to be a part of that. So this is, instead of being hostile to religion, our government should be open to religion competing fairly and squarely with other alternatives. So it was the right decision. And what I loved is all 6 Republican appointees stood together. Can you imagine if they actually did that on a regular basis? We could change the country.
Well, let's move on then to the pending Supreme Court decision. Do you expect that Roe will be overturned, and do you expect to see violent protests? What do you expect to see in the aftermath of that?
Well, I'll say first, Doug, that some of these justices are friends of mine, and I'm repulsed that the Biden administration hasn't done more to say that the violence aimed at them is wrong, and the protests and the intimidations at their homes, this is wrong. This is un-American behavior. We don't allow this when people on my side of the political aisle get aggressive, and we shouldn't allow it when people on the other side get aggressive. Here's what Roe v. Wade, if it was overturned, would do, Doug. It simply restores this decision back to the states. So blue states will be pro-abortion, red states will be hostile to abortion. This is how the framers envisioned issues of controversy that the Constitution doesn't speak to. And remember, the word privacy doesn't appear in the Constitution. The word abortion doesn't appear in the Constitution. There's no conversation in the Constitution about sexual relations or, all these kinds of modern controversial questions. They're not addressed in the Constitution. So what we believe as constitutionalists they should do is either pass an amendment or simply let the voters in the states decide. And so I have great confidence that America can handle this if Roe v. Wade is overturned. And one more thing, for the fact that these counseling clinics, these clinics that give women alternatives and choices, true choices on abortion, that they're being firebombed and attacked, and the Biden administration says nothing. Joe Biden says nothing. It really shows you what a desperate time we're in.
Well, that brings me to my next point, because there have been suggestions that the Department of Justice right now, under Merrick Garland, has clearly become one-sided, is not enforcing justice fairly and evenly and blindly, that it is taking sides now. A dangerous time in American politics. Do you agree with that it's gone that far?
Yes, in the history of our country, it's very rare. Look at the 1-6 proceedings. It's very rare that a congressional subpoena, when someone doesn't follow the directives of that subpoena, for the Department of Justice of the same party to then indict that person like they did in the cases of Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon. People can have their opinions on these men, but the idea that the Democrat majority in the House is colluding with the Department of Justice in the Biden administration to attack their political enemies is obnoxious. I mean, Congress is one branch of government. DOJ and the executive branch is a separate branch of government. I can see where indictments would sometimes occur when you don't go along with a congressional subpoena. But I'm very worried that this 1-6 committee is colluding with the Biden DOJ to just go after their political enemies. This is not the American way.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the J6 committee because that was going to be part of my line of questioning. So I'll get right to it right now. It is an interesting hearing. There is interesting testimony there, but I consider it, like so many Americans do, to be illegitimate in the sense that it's like a trial without a defense. It's like a trial without a cross-examination. And if you've ever been a reporter covering a trial and you think things are going really well for the prosecution and then you hear the defense's side, sometimes things will change just dramatically. What are we missing in this hearing? What is America not hearing from this one-sided hearing?
The whole other side. So in the history of America, in 245 years or so, we have never had a congressional committee aimed at oversight that didn't have a role for the minority party, in this case, the Republican Party. There is no role for the Republican Party. Nancy Pelosi picked Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger to be on this committee because she knew that they're hostile to the views of the Republican Party. So what you have is a one-sided television produced, you have this former ABC News producer televising, or at least producing the whole event. It's a charade of propaganda, of videos and carefully edited clips to try to get the American people to say, you know what, it looks like I hate socialism and inflation and Afghanistan and the idea that America's projecting weakness. But, I have to rethink voting Republican because of all of these amazing clips coming out of the 1-6 committee. And that's the intent. It's to distract voters from what they really care about, which is the failure of socialism in the Biden administration. So what I would say is this is the most obnoxious misuse of congressional powers to try to sway an election that's clearly going one direction. Look at the right track, wrong track. Look at the generic ballot where Republicans have an advantage. Look at Joe Biden's historically low approval ratings. The Democrats are set to be walloped in these elections, and the 1-6 committee is their last-ditch effort to try to get voters to consider not voting Republican.
One of the things that has come out in this committee is that President Trump was absolutely consumed with overturning the results of this election. I know we haven't heard the other side of that story. You've been a very, very loyal Donald Trump supporter throughout it all. Are you concerned about the midterm elections in the sense that many of the problems with voting in America during that election, on the front end, not the back end that Donald Trump was so concerned about, but the rules that the COVID epidemic allowed changes for, sometimes unconstitutional rule changes, will remain in place for these midterm elections and beyond that?
So it's a good question, Doug, and let me just say, local elected officials do not get to decide which laws they will follow and not follow when it comes to the election. After the election of 2020, I went out to Nevada with the team, with Rick Grinnell and others, and we found that they systematically did not check the signatures on the hundreds of thousands of extra ballots that were sent through the mail. And that alone could have changed the outcome of the election. This is a disgraceful thing in this country that the leaders in Detroit, in Milwaukee, in North Carolina, in Nevada, in Las Vegas, Nevada, in all these big cities, in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and we can go on and on and on, they decided to break the laws when it came to following voter ID and signature verification, and even just the democratic norm. By the way, globally, that you have the right to observe the count. These laws were all broken, and they said it was because of COVID. So I do share the concern that we haven't fixed these problems yet, and I want rules-based voting. If my team loses, fine, we lost. But we can never have an election ever again, certainly not a presidential election, where local officials' decision to not follow the law creates this huge question mark in more than 50% of the voters' minds across the country about whether or not it was a fair and square election. I don't believe it was a fair and square election, and I think we can never have an election like that again.
Hi, I'm Doug McKelway, and thank you for watching Centerpoint. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Leave a comment below and keep the conversation going by sharing this video with a friend who needs to see it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.